I am starting the March 12, 2025 meeting of the Finance Committee. Tonight we are joined by the Capital Planning Committee, and I will defer to the chair to introduce this committee.
Thank you. I'm chair of the Capital Planning Committee. My name is Christopher Moore, and we will just have us go all the way down the road. Ratnakar, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ratnakar Velanki. I live on Adams Street. This is my first year on the Capital Planning Committee.
I'm Alex McGee. It's good to see you all again for the fourth consecutive.
Is it really, Alex? Is it really good to see us all again? Say it again, Alex.
Yeah. See you next week. Yep.
Hi, Timur Yantar. I live on Bates Road. This is my 8th year on Capital Planning.
Julie Wayman, Treasurer Collector. I'm Lauren Costa, the Budget Coordinator. I'm not actually technically on the committee, but I work for the town, so.
And you help us a lot.
I do.
Ida Cody, Town Controller.
Baden Broaddus. I live up on Greenwood near Stratton.
Joe Solomon, Appleton Street, Vice Chair.
I should say I'm the secretary.
And Darryl.
I live in a blue house on Cedar Island.
All right, well, take it away.
All right, so can you bring up the presentation? All right. Is it possible to make it full screen?
Yeah,
or?
sorry.
Okay. Terrific.
Drop down that one.
A little better. All right. So this is our annual presentation of the Finance Committee, and you can see some work happening there, but let's get into the business of our work together. So the first slide here is the agenda. There it is. We'll talk about the things we're asking you, the Finance Committee, to do. Probably talk a little about who we are. We'll have some stuff about what we do. Many of you who've been around Finance Committee for a while know all that stuff, but I gather there's some new folks around as well. So especially for the new folks, but old folks too, if you have any questions, please interrupt so that we're all square on what we're trying to accomplish. We'll talk about the definition of capital, the overview of the whole capital process, the capital plan versus the capital budget, how the capital plan fits into the town budget, and then we'll go into detail on the recommendations that we're making for capital purchases for all the different town departments, in order of the departments which are the largest in terms of the total expenditure this year. Then we'll talk about reappropriations, recap the actions that we're asking you to take, and that's that. So starting with the actions on the next slide, we're asking you to vote favorable action on the recommended capital budget and the reappropriation of unused capital funds. That's what town meeting is going to vote on at the end of the day. We're also asking you to endorse the 5-year capital plan, which we'll go into detail and which you have in your appendices to the presentation. Now, typically we also ask you to endorse debt rescissions, where we take away an authorization to issue debt. Don't have any of those this year. Next slide. You've seen all of us say their names. One thing I thought would be useful on this slide is just to say there are a couple different groups on the committee. There's the citizen appointees. There's a finance committee designee, Darryl. And then we also have town officials who are regular voting members of the committee. Next slide, please. So here's how we organize ourselves. We divide up into 4 subcommittees that handle different town departments. And you can see the layout here. This layout is unchanged from last year, other than new folks plugging into the committee. And one thing I should have mentioned is that in the category of town officials on the committee, Fran Gorski, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, is a member of the committee as the superintendent's designee. He was unable to be here tonight due to a family emergency. All right, next slide. Why do we do this whole thing for capital planning? We're trying to set and meet long-term expectations. So the town, the finance committee, town meeting, and the citizens know what the plan is, what we're likely to be able to afford, what we're likely not to be able to afford in the category of capital. So we're trying to reduce uncertainty about, that we will be able to afford a thing. And then also to facilitate some prioritization about when things can be purchased, how much we can spend on them, et cetera. And that, we hope, gives the town meeting and the citizens confidence when we're spending large sums of money. Next up, what we do in our Arlington capital planning practice is we create a 5-year plan, which includes all the non-exempt capital spending. Exempt capital spending is often its own world. And that capital plan is limited to 5% of the adjusted town revenue by essentially convention. That's how we've been doing it for a long time. The way we do it is we solicit capital requests from the town departments. They send in all the stuff they like. We meet with the departments to get further clarity on what these things are and why they think they're a good idea. And then we discuss them in the full committee. And then at the end of the day, the full committee has to look at the forecast of future budgets and figure out what we can fit. And you'll see that process along we go. We've been doing this since 1987, and the 5% rule seems to have worked reasonably well for the town. So that's what we're doing. Next slide. What is capital? Capital assets are things, typically, although some of them are a little bit virtual, like software licenses, that has an expected useful life of 2 years and costs at least $3,000, or is purchased in a program where you buy a lot of essentially identical things for $25,000 or more. A capital improvement is something you do to a capital asset that either adapts it to a new use or makes it, lengthens its life more than just sort of ordinary maintenance would do. So some examples of capital assets are vehicles and photocopiers and rooftop units for HVAC, school buildings, playgrounds, all that kind of stuff. Capital improvements that we think of as sort of canonical examples are wiring, a new roof, new plumbing, maybe lighting improvements. In terms of what's not an asset, a capital asset or a capital improvement, interior painting is our sort of typical canonical example as something that ought to be maintenance. And it is not a capital improvement unless the painting is part of a larger capital project. That would be, because it would be silly to force people to split it up. So when you build a new building, yes, you can paint it. Next slide. So expenditures fit in the capital plan when they're for a capital improvement, or for the purchase or lease of a capital asset, or for a third category, which is important to keep in mind, for studies or plans in preparation for purchase of a capital asset or for improvement of a capital asset. Next slide. So I hit it earlier, there's two big things we do. One is the capital budget. That's the money we want to spend in FY26, and that's the thing that town meeting approves. And the 5-year capital plan, which gives us a 5-year look forward into what we think will happen. We expect the capital plan is wrong, that it will change. New information will become available, new needs identified, different costs figured out. All that we know is going to happen, but this is the best guess that we have at this point. We limit the net capital plan over the full 5 years to be the expected town, 5% of the expected town budget over the full 5 years. Some years will be too high, some years will be too low. We used to kind of massage the numbers to try to make it look nice and even, but what we found is that every year we kind of threw that out and started over because enough things have changed that all that was really not doing anything for us. But we still think there's value in keeping the overall budget for the 5-year period, or the overall plan, sorry, for the 5-year period at 5% of the town budget. And then I already covered that last bullet. So the next slide. So some of the things that are worth sort of talking about that have changed over the years, one of them is what I just mentioned, that we don't try to get every single year of the plan to be balanced. Another is that IT services, as you're all aware, I'm sure, kind of changed from a situation where you bought servers and server rooms and software licenses that were long-term. Those all sort of look like capital expenses. Now most of the world of IT has moved to cloud services, which looks a lot more like operating. So we have over time been trying to sort of figure out how to manage that and push the things that really look like operating expenses into the operating budget, which has been a process because the operating budget didn't have enough room to just take them all. One of the things that we identified this year as a problem is that when a new service is needed, or when we want to transition from an old software as a service to a new one, that can be difficult for the operating budget to accommodate. And so we adopted a new policy this year, which will apply next year in FY27, that for new projects, all the first fiscal year costs are capital eligible. So even a SaaS fee, which you would normally think of as operating, will take on the capital budget. But for the future years, it needs to go to operating. So we're trying to be practical because we're trying to make it work for the town to be able to adopt a new service and then plan in the succeeding years to pay for it out of operating. For transitions between an old service to a new service, it's a similar sort of thing. Capital plan will take all of the first fiscal year costs that are in excess of the go forward cost. And so in both cases, the future costs are not capital eligible. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're trying to give some clarity about what belongs and what doesn't. So the next slide. The FY26 budget and plan are within 5% of the town budget. For FY26, that's $12.4 million in capital before the offsets, 10.7 million net after the offsets, and we'll go into some detail about what those offsets are. And like most years, it feels pretty tight. There's a lot of things the town wants to do that are good things. Proactive renovations of our aging buildings, for instance. There are a lot of things that the town wants to do to make the town better, to improve services. Oftentimes there are capital equipment purchases that are associated with that. Borrowing costs are higher, as you know, and it's a little tough still to figure out what future costs are, especially when you're looking out into the distance. Like a $2 million fire engine in 5 years, what will it cost? If you ask the fire engine company, they'll say, plan on 10% inflation, which is madness. And it would blow up the plan. But you know, their answer is to make sure that we have enough money so we can buy their fire engine. We need to make a plan for something that seems more realistic, and that's what we attempt to do. Next slide. So in order to pull this all together, the members of the committee score every single request, and then we have to figure out what we can't do, and those scores are a guide that we use to try to decide what things do we need to reduce, delay, or eliminate. And then we coordinate those delays and cuts with the town manager's office and the department heads that are affected. Some of the things that are kind of happening this year, like last year, APS capital requests for Audiston are being held back, only doing things that are really emergent, because we don't know what that building is what's gonna happen to that building. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend a lot of capital money on it if we're then gonna knock down and start over or something. So I don't know what will happen, but we're trying to avoid spending a lot of capital money on it right now. So we'll figure out where that one goes. In terms of other scope reductions, there was a request this year for electrification studies for the schools, one every year at approximately $1 million a year. It's about 4.8 million over the 5 years. And the committee decided it would not be wise to fund those out of the capital budget. So we'll have a slide about that later, but you'll see that. Public EV charging stations, also we pushed off pending a study to see what made sense and how to balance the public charging stations versus the town's needs for electric charging and where these things could go. The Veterans Memorial Project requested a funding increase of $300,000, which the committee did not approve. Town hall renovations, we've been allocating about $75,000 a year to sort of nibble away at things needed in town hall. There's a much bigger project there someday, and due to the tightness of the budget, we've removed that funding for the first three years of the budget. Blue Bikes got some grant funding for FY26, so we took that out. We took out their request for capital money, and we've also delayed expansion requests in FY28 and FY30 to see how it goes. But we weren't willing to commit, even at the plan level, that there would be capital money for that. We also pushed high-cost vehicles and other things like that out a year when we could. It gets a little more use out of the existing asset and then starts us off with a new one a little bit later, so we'll have it for longer. So you want to take over, Alex?
All right. So capital plan progress. This is just to give some sort of examples of projects that are have recently completed or are near completion, and things that are sort of in progress, just to give you some of the flavor that we work with on capital. You guys all know about the new DPW campus, town yard. That project is very near the finish line. It's not fully done yet. I understand that the town manager gave you a pretty detailed update on that. Recently, the community center building, we have completed a building renovation project there, but there are still some ongoing projects there as well. An elevator this year, some HVAC work. There's a handful of other HVAC projects around town. We'll get into those in a little bit. Playground updates at Robbins Farm, that was supplemented with ARPA, Monotony Rocks, a design for that, Stratton Bishop Pierce, some safety upgrades. The Brackett Playground project is just recently completed. School and town IT projects. We have a combined school and town IT department here. A lot of our capital is ubiquitous between the two. Sometimes it's requested through one lane, but it applies to sort of both sides of the house. Munis module upgrades have been done there, network upgrades, which include fiber, like refibering areas of a building or a building, switches, upgrading our network connectivity to Wi-Fi 6, which provides faster and more secure connections, conference room outfitting, those kinds of projects. Computers and hardware, so for both town staff, school staff, administrative staff, and students, and school security. These don't necessarily live in IT, but in an IT perspective. Some large vehicle projects, such as a fire engine this year, an ambulance this year, along with a very sort of large vehicle procurement program. Every year we purchase new DPW vehicles, police cruisers, those sorts of vehicles. Plans that are in progress right now, the Whittemore Robbins complex is nearing completion, is almost done. Parallel Park construction is underway on that. Brackett, we pretty much just finished. We always have a pretty robust roadway and sidewalk program. The entrance of the Robbins Library, I was just out there with the facilities director and the town manager a couple weeks ago, envisioning what that project will look like. That includes sort of the front steps, the entryway plaza. So more to come on that. Bishop and Hardy roof projects underway. Both are either out to bid or have just returned bids. A number of different HVAC projects. Some of those are ARPA related as well. IT projects, every year we have them going. Trash and recycling toters, we'll get to that in a minute. The Mystic Street Bridge is finally going to go into construction. That is under contract now. Obviously the high school is a huge project, and we'll have another slide on that as well. Next slide, please. So every year, in order to sort of project out our target budget, we take a pro forma look at it's a point in time look at what we think the budget is going to be for the next 5 years. This year, it was set at 228 million, just under 229 million. From that, we reduce all exempt debt that's on the books. We adjust for enterprise spending, and that leaves us with a total town budget of $213 million. That obviously includes the school department's budget. And so from that, we take 5%, and that gives us a target to shoot for what we think we can afford in the year, and that applies to each of the 5 years. Next slide, please. So we use this, a pretty complicated spreadsheet, and this is what we call the 5% tab, and this takes our all of our debt at the top, builds to an exempt debt number. Then we do a number of different offsets. We offset the plan, which allows us to spend specifically to some items or spend above the 5% rule. And that gives us to a net non-exempt plan cost. In FY26, that's $10.6 million. And then you'll see along the very bottom of this slide, okay, I can slide down a teeny bit, yeah. You see for FY26, we're $260 on the good side of zero, and then over the course of the plan, it sort of oscillates. 27, we're in the red. We know we're in the red. We're going to come back into the positive side of the ledger before we budget for that year, and then overall for the 5 years, we're $10,000 on the good side. which is pretty good. It's a good balance on the $1.1 billion over those 5 years. Next slide, please. So how do we fund capital? The capital funding sources that we use, this is pretty much a repeat of last year. We use cash. That's just money that comes out of the town's general fund. It's appropriated at town meeting. We bond, and that's something that we borrow for. We work very closely with borrowing consultants and bond counsel, the treasurer, comptroller, myself, and the town manager. We kind of make up that borrowing group. We just issued debt. We do it every winter. Got a good rate, 3.5%, so we're happy with that. We also just affirmed our AAA rating, the stable outlook, which we're also very proud of. And then other. Other is something that is not a cash or bond. It could be a grant. It could be an enterprise fund. It's something that lives outside of the cash and grant, cash and bond categories. Next slide, please. I will briefly touch on ARPA. A lot of the projects, capital projects that we've done have sort of showed up in the capital plan, even though they're not necessarily approved or voted by this group. It's important to sort of showcase some of this work because it is very capital in nature. The town received $35.2 million from the American Rescue Plan Act, which came to be during the sort of middle of the pandemic. All of our ARPA money had needed to be what's called obligated by December 31st of 2024. We met that deadline, so we're not giving any of our money back to the federal government, which is great. We have heard of some neighbors who had to give back some sizable sums, which is unfortunate. So some project highlights with ARPA money, the school HVAC projects, including projects at the Bishop, Dallin, Harding, Thompson, some town HVAC projects, including the community center, the police station, Park Circle, and the cottage at Whittemore Robbins. A number of playground projects, including Bishop, Pierce, Stratton, Parmenter, water meter replacement, sort of a wide scale project with that. In FY25, so current fiscal year and looking beyond, we have some fairly sizable affordable housing projects that we are a part of, economic development, maybe some granting programs, more HVAC projects that are out sort of to bid and in construction right now. Subsidizing the master planning effort, a big grant for the Mystic Street Bridge to get that over the finish line, rebuilding a sewer pumping station, a community health assessment was completed, and we procured HEPA filters for the schools. So this just gives you an idea of the sort of wide range of things that ARPA touched. Next slide, please.
Before we leave that slide, I think
Yes.
one thing that's worth keeping in mind is the ARPA money showed up for us at a really good time, and it's taken care of a lot of capital needs. It's done. So one of the things that is going to be something to keep in mind is that those projects, when the next HVAC comes along, we're no longer going to be saying, "Great, ARPA, take care of it for us." So those things are going to land back in the capital budget.
That's a great point. So with our ARPA money, we took $10 million, which is the maximum allowable, and used it as a general revenue offset for the town's operations. So that left us about $25.2 million to spend on all these projects. And that was envisioned and spent over roughly 4 years. And so, if you spread that out, it's about $6.5–7 million a year that we have spent and plan to spend that we will no longer have in the future. So,
And most of it is capital.
most of it's capital in nature. There's some operating stuff, some public health, some premium pay stuff, but most of it is capital in nature. Thank you, Kai. Okay, so a high level summary of where the FY26, where the sort of the capital budget is envisioned being spent. $14.64 million. So we call the acquisition cost. So this is the sort of the cost of all of these items. It may not necessarily be what you see in the FY26 capital budget, and that is because some of these items are bonded, and so we don't have to pay for them until future years, and we're only paying a portion of that acquisition cost, and that's based on a number of factors, including how long we're borrowing for and how expensive that item is. This table, it was new last year, and it's a good way to sort of visualize where the capital dollars are going by department. You see 45% of them, or $6.5 million, are going to public works in various capacities. 30% of them, or $4.4 million, are going to the schools. Additionally, 7, about 8%, and 1.1 million are going to IT within the schools. And then all other categories make up sort of roughly 3 or less %. And that includes planning, facilities, community safety, which would be police and fire, town IT, and then all other, which is a sort of combined category, which includes recreation, HHS, libraries, purchasing, and the clerks. They all have some smaller capital projects that total 4.7. Not any one of them makes up more than 2%. So they're all sort of smaller dollar values on the capital side.
One thing that's new this year, just so you know, is we've split out IT into school IT and town IT, so you can kind of see how that comes together.
Right. And we'll touch more on that a little bit later. Next slide, please. All right, so the DPW project, I know you guys had a fairly detailed update recently, as I said earlier. So all buildings on site are now occupied and functioning. So that's a number of the various DPW divisions, the facilities department and the IT department all live sort of within this the complex over there. The project reached substantial completion just last fall. There's still some work underway, some site work and some nagging underground issues. And so expecting a potential modest reserve fund transfer to close that project out sometime this fiscal year. I think that's about the level of detail we can share here.
Okay, next, Joe Solomon's gonna talk to us about roadways and sidewalks and curbs and ramps and other good stuff.
So in the coming year, there's 1.7 million in money for roads. Over the 5 years that we look at, the average spend per year is a little over $2 million per year. With roads, there's a study done by an outside consultant every 5 years that says, here's the condition of your roads, and if you spend this much, here's where it's gonna be in each of the next few years. With the money that's in the capital plan, over the course of the next 5 years, we'll go from the 76 that we're at today to a 77. Basically, keep everything running. For the sidewalks, curbs, and ramps in FY26, there's $1 million. This goes up very moderately over the 5 years, average of a little like 1.14 over the 5 years. For this one, there's not a regular update to a study, but there was a study in 2015 that said essentially, here's the condition, here's the backlog, here's the types of problems that you have. And then finally, we have the most recent override had a section for mobility improvements in FY26. This is $205,000. Primarily, the focus is looking at sidewalks, some of the more trippy bricks in the center, and the potential of some RFPs on Mass Ave. And again, this is construction work, so it would kick off once the weather gets better. Any questions?
All right.
An RRFP.
A rapid
Rectangular
rapid flashing beacon. So it's a pedestrian signal that makes it very clear that somebody is about to cross the
Like a
location.
library?
Hmm?
Like a library?
Library is one site that we're looking at. There's a number of spots along the Mass Ave corridor that we all know are very problematic for pedestrians. We're also looking at bump outs, so traffic bump outs. It's called a road diet sometimes. That naturally helps slow down cars. So things like that. There are some places on Mass Ave that may require what's called a pedestrian island in the middle, which would be a sort of a safe haven in the middle of Mass Ave for people to stop if traffic flow gets back up. So there's a number of things that we're looking at and actively working on right now. Some of them will go under construction this year.
All right, Jennifer.
Just a quick question. Any update to plans to bring sidewalks in the municipal block? So the library, town hall, those sidewalks are in really, really poor condition.
Yeah.
Are we waiting for a grant, or is that why we're not doing work yet, or?
No, a lot of it comes down to staffing in DPW and people to either do or manage the work. Yeah, we have some capital money that's built up. It's very extensive work getting that done, but we are planning work this construction season there as well.
To start some of that,
Repointing
okay.
some of the bricks, et cetera, things that are obvious problems.
Annie and then Shirley.
So 2 questions. So if we did a 2015 study on sidewalks, curbs and ramps that said we had a $26 million backlog, do we now have a $16 million backlog, or are we have we not tackled the backlog because, like, are we making a dent in it?
So I don't know, we've spent a little over $7 million since
Okay.
2015. But to my understanding, there's not another study planned to then reevaluate because the change in quality isn't quite as dynamic as the roads.
Okay,
It's like, it's broken, we need to fix it, or it's not broken and it's gonna be okay for a while.
So
okay.
we're making some progress against the backlog, I think.
Yeah, I think that's.
Exactly how much is a little hard to quantify.
And then how are we doing on ADA compliance on curb cuts and all of that?
So, making progress there also. You may have seen over the fall, in the Mass Ave area, sort of starting right around Town Hall and going up, maybe just on this side of CPS, there's, I think, like 6 individual curb cut projects that were done along there. Extensive work. That's the kind of thing that we're looking to spend that ADA money on, DPW ADA money.
Okay, and if the federal government comes back to us and says, you know what, we're canceling ADA, you don't have to do this, we're still planning on doing it, yes?
Yeah, we're bound by sort of promises that were made in the past. Some overrides dictated some of that money was spent on this kind of thing, and so that's how it's programmed in.
Okay.
Charlie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the roadway improvements, how many miles are we doing each year in the roadway? And what percentage of the total mileage is that?
I don't have it offhand. I don't know. I would say an insignificant percentage. The work's very expensive. I think there's 125 total miles of roadway in town. I would estimate that we're doing less than a mile of that.
I thought we were trying to synchronize it with the water sewer replacement.
We are. We do synchronize the work with us. So things that we have to do if we have a main like a planned main replacement, then we'll synchronize road work when possible. Sometimes it's not possible. We either can't meet the scheduling demands that MWRA may have, or we have a break that causes us to go in and just do it straight away. But we do try to synchronize that work whenever we can.
Is there any discussion to jettison these, like the curb cut money that came out of the override? I'm not particularly concerned about that. That was a recent override. But I know that my recollection is that we had 1 or 2 of these override promises that were political plums thrown out to the public to get the override passed years ago. And they're still drifting through the capital plan regardless of whether the work is needed or not, you know? And I'm just, do we ever evaluate whether that work is needed, or are we just sitting there spending that money forever?
It's an interesting question, and I don't know if I would. So we do keep the money that is promised in overrides. We carry it throughout the plan.
I'm aware of that.
And it is so affirmative, yes. We have not considered taking that and reprogramming it.
So to look at some of the big ones we're talking about here, there's a roadway reconstruction override from 2011, which is currently this fiscal year $550K. But we need money for roads. So it's not like we're taking the money and doing things we don't need. Another one would be the accessibility improvements override from 2019, currently at 226K. Also ample need in town. So I don't think you could say that we're carrying these things along and doing work that isn't needed.
Well, they're just sort of, they're exempting the capital plan from the limitations of the 5% rule, right?
Effectively, because
They're making it non-exempt.
yes, because a promise was made that we were going to get incremental money that got spent in a certain way. The question, I agree though, when does it end? We don't seem to have a way of knowing.
Well, I think, so for the 2 categories, I think we do, right? So we get a road report every 5 years. The amount of money that we have in the budget, which includes the $400-something thousand of override money, is part of how we keep the road score, which is our best way of measuring, at this 76, 77 level, right? To Andy's point, for accessibility improvements, we had a, 20-some-odd $1 million deficit, and we are working towards that. If there's some point at which we decide the condition is such that we can ignore the deficit, then the money could go away. But I don't know if year by year financial analysis is how we do it. It's more about going and saying like, is this asset good enough that we can stop spending?
Any other questions so far?
Thank you.
All right.
So, next up is Vaden. You wanna
I'll
introduce
take-
it?
No one wants to take the toters. So the toters, which we brought up last year, it's about $1.5 million of total cost, half of which was intended to be funded through grants, and 750 is currently in the plan, the capital plan. We now have sample toters.
Yeah, so the issue with toters is that if we were to accept the grant that the Mass DEP is offering, it would force us into taking a much smaller toter than your average household would want. And so nothing is set yet in stone. And no, we don't have a new contract yet. We're sort of, the town manager and DPW director are working to get that into place. Our vendor, whether it is the same or a new vendor, will start a new contract July 1st. So that's coming right at us into focus. So depending on which way that ultimately goes, we may or may not accept a grant. If we do not accept a grant from the DEP, it'll allow us to get larger trash cans, which would be more palatable for every household. It wouldn't necessarily, maybe not every household, some would disagree. A lot of people would disagree with that. That's the problem, is that this is a very divisive issue. More work to be done here. The $750,000 will not cover the full amount if we don't take a grant though. So that leaves questions on how we would fund that. And those are questions yet to be answered.
Questions on toters, Annie?
Okay, so is it possible for the vendor to deal with mixed sizes on the toters? So could we say to people, if you want a town toter, which is free, it's this size. If you want to buy your own toter, because you want a larger one, you're free to buy your own toter.
They are requiring a single standard size toter within our contract. So that's sort of that's what we're dealing with.
Sophie?
How are you calculating the number of toters needed?
That's a really good question also. Currently, the DPW director has a few of his staff that are out counting every single home in town, how many toters they currently are using. So they're tracking the routes, seeing who's putting out what, and they're doing an actual survey of every home right now. So this turned into a serious math problem because you can't go with just the total number of parcels, the total number of households, because some have multiple toters, some don't. So this is factoring into whether we think we can go with the smaller or not. It's emerging that we think it would be problematic to go with the smaller toters based on what we're seeing out on the street.
Just follow, does our town census with the number of residents per household, that doesn't help in any way when we have that data?
Yeah, it does help, but it just gives you averages. It doesn't. It's hard to predict whether one person will produce one trash can, one tiny trash can, or 3 or 4. There's a lot of. We currently have unlimited usage, and so it's hard to correlate those together.
Jennifer?
Oh, I just wanna say, I think you're gonna get complaints no matter what you do, guaranteed.
Yep.
So, I have a situation where I have, my trash is in a closed container, it's only so big, so if I put more things in that are too big, it doesn't fit. So, like, they're just, I think you will find the town will be divided and
I think you're right. Yeah.
And have you quantified what savings you will get by using toters?
We are absolutely gonna need to have toters. It'll save us over 7 figures per year on the contract. So we must use toters. The question is the size and how they're ultimately paid for, whether it's town money exclusively or town money subsidized by a grant.
Sophie?
And if you go with the smaller toters, is there a way of doing 2 per household for the ones who have like 6
Yeah.
member? we have 6 in our household, like, you know, doing 2 or,
Yep,
so you go with the smaller one, get the grant, and you just double up when you need it?
So that is one part of the puzzle. Theoretically, yes, it would be probably an annual fee, where if you wanted one, you'd have to pay some normalized fee every year that would have to be adjusted based on what the contract cost is. So that is one option that's being considered.
Carolyn?
Is there a reason the state grant or wherever the grant is coming from wants the smaller toters?
They want to push communities into producing less trash through the trash stream. They wanna push more recycling, which is, you know, great. We are already a very high recycling community. We generally are aligned with that kind of thinking, but it doesn't change the fact that we have always produced a certain amount of waste, and that these small toters may not accommodate that much waste.
Topher?
So, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little confused. You're saying they all have to be the same size?
Right.
But they want to encourage recycling?
Right.
So wouldn't that mean you'd have a bigger recycling toter and a smaller trash toter?
Different trucks. So just like you have different, like you wouldn't have the same truck doing trash and recycling.
So those two could be different sizes?
They will certainly be different sizes.
Okay.
Recycling is going to be much bigger either way. I believe that they're gonna be set at 64 gallons, I think, which is the sort of the standard large toter that you may see around. And I just wanna preface all of this, that the town manager and DPW commissioner are doing these negotiations. I'm very peripheral to this and don't have a lot of detail.
So you're not certain that we're actually gonna be using toters in 26?
We will be using toters.
We will be using, but it's just a question of what size.
Correct.
Carolyn?
What percentage of the town is already composting for residents?
I don't know. Sorry.
Sophie?
For the amount of trash, do we have any idea, either from studies or from these surveys, of how much is going into trash that could be recycled and just isn't, and is that maybe what's making it look like a lot more?
Yeah, these are things that the DPW commissioner, that this group has studied very closely, and the inverse is true also, is what sort of trash is going into the recycling stream, because we get charged for that. And so these are things that is part of the analysis and part of the calculation on what size we will need. So that's being considered.
Any other questions?
So obviously more to come on this, probably not from me, but from the manager, potentially the select board, I think.
I just ask I wasn't gonna ask, but I guess I'm more curious. So we're moving to these plastic things. Because I think you said at another meeting that the hauling companies are trying to deal with like repetitive stress injuries and twisting injuries and things like that, which makes total sense. So, but our grass will still be picked up in paper bags?
I don't know exactly what the yard waste program is gonna look like. It'll be on some sort of, like, we can currently, like all of our other things, we currently have essentially unlimited yard waste on every week. That program will have to change significantly as well. But I believe, yes, it'll still be bagged or bins in its own, bin, picked up by hand, I think.
Okay. You really, okay. I'm not blaming you.
Some things don't make sense, yeah.
There's an illogical, I mean, it's the same repetitive stress injury, it's the same repetitive motion, whether you're throwing grass in a plastic bag or grass in a trash barrel, but that's for them to figure out, okay.
Total number of people on a truck is also part of this.
It's a huge part of the equation. Like with a truck with a robot arm, you have a single operator that operates everything within the machine, and on a yard waste crew, you typically have 3 people. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't necessarily make sense. I don't know that these waste companies have found a way to really mechanize yard waste well enough yet to where they force you into it. I would imagine somewhere in the future that will happen also. Okay, Dave, you wanna take this back?
So this is a little easier than the toters. So this is just a breakdown of the overall DPW sub-departments and the 26 spend versus out year spend. The 850 that's kind of jumping out there and out years on admin is the street light replacement. It is more economical for us to do that all at once. It is one thing that we could dig into if we could do it in one phase. Cemetery is higher in 26 due to a fence replacement, but their funding is offset by the cemetery trust. And then I will touch on highway since we covered that. And then water and sewer as well is also offset by an enterprise fund.
Okay, next slide. So the high school, we'll give a sort of a relatively brief update on the high school. There is a very robust standing school building committee as well that has their own meetings that I encourage everyone to check in on. There's a website that's updated regularly and that sort of thing. However, the high school, phase 3 of this was just finished in February. I toured it yesterday myself. It's beautiful. This is sort of mostly known as the athletic wing. There's also the principal's office, community ed, and a couple of other sort of offices that are involved in this portion of construction. So the project remains on schedule and on budget. We just issued most of the last debt for this project in February as well. So we're tracking, we entered phase 4 construction. This is mostly fields and site work. There's still some demolition on an existing building. It's gonna come down between the newly completed phase and athletic fields. And so, yeah, this project is full steam ahead, anticipated to be fully completed September of 2025, so this year, with the anticipation that the complete closeout will follow 12 to 16 months after that. The MSBA, there's a long tail on the closeout to make sure all the work is up to the standard that is required in order for the project to close out. So generally good news on the high school project. Next slide, please. Question. Sorry.
Thank you. It was a related question, but I'm looking at the new high school and all the HVAC projects in the elementary schools. Is the standard now that we kind of air condition the whole building or just the library or what?
Yeah, anything new, anything that MSBA participates on requires air conditioning now. And so anytime we rebuild a school, there will be air conditioning. The way classrooms are, so we've had some classrooms in the 90s where we have to like basically close school because it's too hot in some classrooms. And so where we're able to, we will be air conditioning more spaces. All right.
Schools. So you're now familiar with that picture. We've had it in the plan for like the past 2 years. We decided to keep it because it's still accurate. That's the Hardy envelope. The school facilities is requesting this year, the next year for fiscal year 26, $4.4 million and a total of $10.5 million over the next 5 years. Of the $4.4 million for fiscal year 26, half of it goes to Hardy, which brings the Hardy school at a total of $3.8 million over several years. We're doing the roof next year. The total is, it's gonna start this year, this summer. The total cost of the roof is $1.3 million. The amounts were allocated over the couple of years. We've already picked a designer and we're wrapping up the construction RFP and hopefully we'll start building this summer. Immediately upon the completion of the roof, we're gonna install the solar panels. The total cost of the solar panels is $274,000. They have a useful life of 25 years and the payback hopefully we'll get credits and incentives, is approximately 8 years. The envelope repairs, we had a study in 2021. We still have active leaks. We did a water testing, which proved that we had weak windows and masonry. And we hope to get the RFP as soon as we get funding for this project. If it gets approved.
John, quick question, when we install solar panels and we get savings on our electricity bills, who sees those savings?
So there's 3 types of incentives. We hope to get roughly 70,000 from the federal government. We are getting incentives from the state, which gets reduced, the bill gets reduced, and we also save in energy by not paying because of that.
So does that go into the school budget, does that go into the town budget, so where do those savings sort of flow to?
It is netted. If you, well, it depends. So the credits from the federal fund, they're gonna go into a revenue fund that we hope to pass, that will pass this fiscal year at the town meeting. So we'll save those credits in that revolving fund.
Okay.
Then the rest of the bills will be netted, so we'll not pay the increased cost.
If your question is who currently pays the bills, it's schools,
It's
so they'll
schools,
see a
so schools
reduced
should
amount.
have, potentially have extra money,
Right,
because
their utility costs will go down.
their utility costs are.
As we add solars to various sites.
Great, great.
They get crushed by utility bills every year also.
Yeah.
They're huge energy users, the Hardys are worse.
I know, these beautiful brick buildings.
We're putting a ton of
Gorgeous,
money
but
into it right now.
I know they are.
And so this should make the building, the facility much more energy efficient.
All right.
One more question.
John?
I've raised this question a couple of times for FinCom, but not for all of you. So with the solar panels, we had a presentation from Lexington where they installed batteries and then were able to actually get a much reduced energy rate because it didn't kind of leveled out the peak demand. So we were told that it's not practical to do in Arlington because we lease the panels instead of buy them. I'm just wondering if any of you are aware of what I'm talking about.
I'm aware of what you're talking about. You asked this question last year also. Our energy, Talia Fox, who's our energy person, she tells us that it would not be wise to do a battery system. Here, we looked at it for the DPW site and went against it because of cost and where we would site the batteries. So we are going to be purchasing this system. So nothing's stopping us from doing it in the future if we can have a place where we can put a battery that's big enough to store energy. But I think that the studies that sort of the design and the studies on this project did not recommend a battery system. She's very sharp and she's the one who's sort of guided these projects.
At least with this system though, we're paying for it. It's not a lease.
This is yeah. So the Bishop and the Hardy, these 2 solar systems that we're doing this year and next, those are owned.
John?
Just noticed that last year there was the Bishop School envelope with window masonry, and that cost $500,000. And it seems this year the Hardy School is $2.2 million. I'm just wondering what the reason for the big difference is there.
I believe it's a smaller school.
Yeah, it's a different school. The Hardy is in worse shape. It's bigger exterior. It's all brick. I'm not entirely sure specifically. Much more work, much more expensive work.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Other major renovations, the last 3 facilities directors have been dealing with aging equipment. The equipment is either at or past the end of life. So now we have a plan for $4.95 million over the next 5 years. I have been instructed to mention that this is a dynamic plan and plans will change, the schedule might change based on actual needs. The RTUs, we will be spending $1.4 million. For bracket, we have planned, fiscal year 26 is gonna be done, we're gonna do bracket in fiscal year 26. And Hardy is gonna be done in phases over 3 years. The EMS, Energy Management System, will be spending $825,000 total. We will start with Pierce in fiscal year 26, and hopefully we'll follow the schedule. I'm not gonna read the schedule, it's there for you, but it is subject to change. Elevator repairs, it's actually not an elevator replacement, it's elevator repairs. We scheduled $1 million for over 5 years. The first one will be Thompson next year, fiscal year 26. Fire alarm replacement, not upgrade, this replacement. We scheduled $600,000, $300,000 for bracket in fiscal year 26, and $300,000 for Dallin in fiscal year 28. And finally, we need a new track and turf replacement for our state-of-the-art high school, which the school department would like to have it in 2027. The current turf was installed in 2015 and it had a useful life of 8 years. It's already been 10 years. So it is their hope that this is gonna go through as well.
Any questions on that? So for Alan and then Dean.
Can I add something before we do questions, if I may? For the track, that is being envisioned as a sort of a refresh, not a full replacement. The turf will be a full replacement.
We actually have a quote and they said we don't need to replace the whole thing, that resurfacing would be sufficient.
Just sort of.
Topher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the track and turf is not part of the high school.
It's not, it was left out of the plan.
And what are the rooftop units?
RTUs are for cooling. So they're air conditioning units that sit on top of the school or building. An interesting point to make about those Hardy RTUs is we haven't done it yet. We anticipate tomorrow night and Monday night that the school committee and the select board will authorize us to submit to the accelerated repair program at the MSBA, which is a program that funds large system replacements. And so the Hardy is what we're applying for. And if we were to get that grant, then this would cover those 3 RTUs as part of that program. This would be a very large program on a magnitude of $5 to $10 million with a replacement, or excuse me, with a grant of roughly 43% of eligible costs being covered by the MSBA. So it'd be a very sizable grant and a really big project. How we would fund that is to be determined yet. We don't even know if we're going to be invited into the program, but just to let you know, we are looking at these kinds of things, which we haven't in the past.
So if you got into that, the whole of this Hardy phase 1, 2, and 3 would be covered by that?
That would wipe those off.
43% covered by that?
Right. Among other things, it would electrify the heating of that school.
Anything else, Topher?
No, thank you.
Alan, John?
Thank you. I would have expected the RTU replacement of the energy management systems would be more synchronized. They typically were done at the same time, and they seem to be completely disjoint. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. They're a little bit disjointed.
They're
We
like
go
totally
after our worst or our most porous buildings first for EMS, and we replace RTUs for the schools that need it the most first. So it's kind of on a prioritized basis.
Is there at least in the RTU replacement, is there at least anticipation that there'll be a modern EMS? Again, they usually work together as a system. That's why I'm surprised they're not.
Yeah, there is, like the EMS is essentially a control system that works in sync with the, with the RTUs and with the boiler system.
Right. They have to be kind of like smart RTUs to work well.
Yeah, no, these, it sort of depends on the school and what the needs are there, I guess.
Okay, I'm surprised at that. Thank you.
I guess they can be sold separately because it was the case at the library where the HVAC was installed way earlier before the EMS, and they had to just replace the EMS later.
Dean?
Has the school department, think about long-term capital planning. Has the school department discussed at all or brought up their, what I guess I'll call hopes and dreams for Audison Middle School? Because it feels like a long time ago at this point, but I know back in 2018 when we were doing the high school that they also wanted the Audison to only put one in at a time. And I'm not espousing preference or position, but it was vocalized, so I was just wondering if that's back up again, now that we're at the end of the high school project.
Yeah, so how the MSBA's core program works, which is their school building program, is you can have essentially one active building project at a time, like you noted. As the high school comes to completion, a core submission will be made at Audison. They open their portal for these submissions this April. I believe that they're preparing to submit that, but I don't know if it's been formalized or if they're actively working on that right now or not, but the applications come due in April for those. And so that works. They have a fixed budget every year. A number of districts apply for a school building project, and then based on need and priority in the MSBA's eyes, then they will invite X number of districts based on the budget each year. So it's a competitive program. Not entirely sure where it stands right now. I don't know what's been said sort of at the school committee level.
Anything else, Dean? Annie?
So I have two questions. On the track and turf replacement, I think town meeting's understanding when we were talking about turf fields was that the high school had already been contracted to replace their turf field. Is that not true?
No, we just got a quote.
Okay, so are we making
It's
an
not under
effort to?
contract. I don't believe it's under contract.
There's two, yeah, there's multiple.
Oh, this is the Pierce Field.
Okay, Pierce Field,
Yes, that is not contracted.
great. Are we considering the environmental impact of turf in figuring out what we wanna do there?
This is a question that's above my pay grade.
No,
Dean?
I do have the answer, because I had to. So the turf that was in question was the high school building project's desire to add two turf fields. So Pierce is in the middle, there used to be a softball field on one side and a baseball field on the other. Those are the ones that were in question for being turf. The complexity, and Jim would be very good at speaking to this, because he had to speak to it in multiple meetings, is Pierce is like, I don't wanna call it ground zero for the toxic stuff cap. But that, they kept repeating during all the meetings that turf has to be there, like part of the solution. Like, we can't just rip it up and start putting grass there. That's how they always explain it.
Okay, so, all right, I'll talk to Jim then. So my other question is then, if we're considering the Audison project coming up, do we know how much exempt debt is rolling off from previous projects?
Top of my head, I don't have the number for you, but yes, we do know that. It would not be near enough to cover the annual payments of a new middle school, but it would be
No,
something.
I get that, but it would be nice to know.
Yeah,
if
we have
something's rolling off before we
sophisticated
get to
models and
pass.
graphs that show us like over time when things come on and roll off and sort of the annual, like, we try to smooth exempt debt so it's steady every year. But we work with Hilltop, who's sort of the best game in town for municipal borrowing. And we work with them very closely every year, and we have all that information. I just don't have it top of my head.
Can we get something sent to?
I'll email you. Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right, Sean, do you have a question?
Yeah, so two questions. So first is maybe quick status on town hall, and just, I'm not sure if there's any thoughts or plans for that. And the second question relates to something that I kind of mentioned a little bit last year, and it's, maybe it relates to town hall. And I wonder is there any possibility or any plan, any ability for us to kind of put money aside for a medium-sized project? Like, we have the cash projects, and you can finance, some trucks and stuff here. But like, for something that's gonna cost, like, say, $8 to $10 million, I feel like in a perfect world, you could put like $500,000 aside for 10 years. But I feel like our only option is to wait until it's a really big project and then get it exempt debt. But, so those are my two questions.
Yeah, good questions. For town hall, there's currently a vote to recommend $300,000 to hire an OPM from the Community Preservation Act Committee. The thought there is that $300,000 will then lead to a $1 million design, which will lead to a $10 million construction project for town halls, and we'll call it the envelope. So essentially all exterior surfaces of town hall. If you wanted to do an entire town hall redo, it would probably be on the magnitude of $100 million. It would be something that we would need to borrow for. We need to have some sort of specialized financing plan. But currently the plan is to go $300,000, assuming that passes town meeting, which would lead to then a roughly $1 million. So that would do schematic design, we'd hire an OPM. Detailed design would be another roughly $1 million, and then the construction roughly $10 million. So that's like the current plan for town hall right now.
Yep. So next step is pretty much gonna get a study, get
Exactly. Get a real detailed study, some of the experts who can tell us and advise us on it.
Come back with some good options. Yep.
Correct. Yep. As far as building a sort of war chest for doing that, it would be tough to in any given year leave money on the table, even if it is going towards a project. It's something that we could consider, but we haven't in the past.
Is it tough because there's just so many other competing needs, or is it tough because it's hard for accounting reasons and
it's competing needs. We have so many capital needs that outstrip our resources that putting money aside in a given year would be just $1 million we could spend on something else.
Yep.
So the economics of the inflation versus the cost of capital outsized too, so it's better to spend it rather than
It's always
sit
better to
doing nothing.
spend now, technically.
I question that. Like anytime I hear it, it's good to spend the money.
Well,
I just
it's
question
better
it, but-
than letting it just put it towards something where at least it's getting some ROI.
That's just I don't buy that, but
So-
maybe I'm in the minority.
So that we need to get through this presentation, so let's move on to playgrounds. And then if there are any questions about what we've already covered, we leave them to the end. So Ida, can you go on with playground?
Sure. The school is committed to maintain the playground safety and to maintain the playgrounds safe and up to code. As you can see in the picture, and Alex mentioned, we've completed this year the bracket for $880,000. And the next major renovation is Thompson for $390,000. $50,000 will be spent next year on design. And in 2027, we will do the whole construction for $340,000. We plan on replacing the rubber and the play structures. Additionally, they're requesting $50,000 a year to maintain the playgrounds. It's mostly to repair the equipment.
Questions on playground? Charlie?
My question is about the previous slide, if I might, Madam Chair. I was curious as to why the elevator needs to be replaced in the newest school. Thompson is the most recently built school among the elementary schools. And it seems like that's got the priority for replacing the elevator.
Yeah, I think that the elevator there is the most, in most dire need, is the most broken. That would be why. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure that's the reason, but I mean, why?
It's not a full, I think it's a car replacement, I think it's a full system replacement, actually. But that's why, it's just the one that is broken.
And so, and just as a follow-up to both Annie and Dean's discussion about the turf, there was a tremendous amount of discussion at town meeting about turf. Is that all behind us now?
I don't think it's behind us, and that's also why this needs further discussion beyond just the capital committee, I think.
But it's independent of that, $1 million is in gray, so there may be discussion about the $1 million.
The gray is because it's not in the current budget.
That's what I mean.
Future year, yeah. But our expectation as the capital committee is that something's gonna have to be done and it's gonna cost some money. The problem of bringing people together and figuring out how we should replace the turf is something that's gonna have to be managed by presumably the school department. And involve a lot of public input and, you know, some real analysis, but that's a little bit, that's outside of what we do in the capital committee.
Thank you.
IT?
Okay, so IT is essentially divided into two categories, IT for schools and then IT for the town. In the interest of time, I'm not gonna go through every project on this list. I'll just focus on the big one. So the first big one is ceiling mounted speakers for 202 classrooms that don't have them yet. This is a very much a priority of the superintendent, both for kids with hearing problems and then just to make sure that teachers can be heard. You can see some of these rooms are pretty big, and these are real photos of our school. These aren't stock shots I got from the internet. The sort of a related one is replacing projectors and smart boards in 80 classrooms this year, and then you can see that continuing into the out years. Then the next two are fairly standard ones, replacing academic PCs and administrative computers and peripherals. We are going to be doing some work probably over the summer with both the school department and Patricia Shepherd with IT on, we have lots of data, you know, numbers of students, numbers of devices. How do we line that data up in a way that substantiates the project request better is the challenge. So for example, you know, what's the you know, lifespan of various devices and how does that factor into the funding request? So that's something we're going to work on them with through the summer. The superintendent is committed to working with us to do that. And hopefully next year we'll have, I don't want to say better data, but more focused data is probably the better approach. And we need to do that on the town side as well. As Brian Gorski from the school department pointed out to us. On the next page, we are putting in $50,000 for Chromebooks for special education paraprofessionals that currently don't have any issued devices at least, and so they're sort of at the mooch off whatever free device happens to be available at the time. Chris mentioned earlier that we are deferring the one-to-one academic device program at the high school. The analogous program at Addison is a much higher priority for the school department for the reasons I've listed here, which they believe are much more compelling with the Addison than as kids get older with in high school. And we've done our best to fund as much of this as we can. I think we ended up funding it over 2 years, I think. That's right. And then the next two are sort of related to the greater sensitivity following the cybercrime incident. The first one is implementing the same CrowdStrike endpoint detection and response program that we've done for the town. This is with 120 administrative devices. And then the next one is also implementing multi-factor authentication using Google MFA. And the department is deciding, in this case, not to purchase hardware fobs, which frankly, for those of us that have used MFA, the fobs are awful, so it's not really giving up much. Any questions on school IT?
Annie?
Yeah, so if they're going to implement Google MFA for free, does that mean that teachers will be using their own device for MFA?
I believe so, yeah.
And they didn't demand to bargain that?
Not based on the information we've been given from the superintendent.
Cool. That's gotta be a first.
She's very persuasive.
Yes.
Other questions?
Then we're gonna take a little swing out of IT for a moment. I'm doing planning, right?
Right.
Yeah, but that's my mission. So the Broadway Complete Streets Design Program, this is $279,000. That's a local match that will result in a $1.1 million grant from the Boston Metro Planning Organization, something like that. The bikeway, the next one, the bikeway improvement design program at Ryder Street and Ed Burns Arena. This is $100,000 from capital, and then how much from community preservation?
50.
50. This is to do the design, and then we will be delaying any construction. Because the MWRA is also doing a project over the next 1 to 2 years, did you say?
About 2 years.
And we are hoping to be able to give them the new design specs when they, restore the site back and say, do it this way, not the way it was. But I guess we don't necessarily know that we'll be able to pull that off. But then there's the 2 other projects related to the bikeway. Then the town public EV charging study. Chris mentioned this earlier. This is really a study on what we need to do on the town side for charging stations, and then overall from both the town and public charging stations, sort of mapping out where they are and where it makes sense. The capital planning committee is not really interested in sort of trying to build a competitive or a public charging network that will compete with private entities that could probably do it more efficiently. And then on the townwide accessibility, there's been $350,000 accumulated in this account from previous requests, so there's not an ask this year. And then we expect to use the built up funds and the rest of this year and then into fiscal 26. Questions on this one?
Topher and then Shirley and then Yankowski.
And so on, thank you, Madam Chair. On bullet 4 there, the bike lane design work, my understanding is there's a grant that's I think $1 million or so that is needed for this project, and that the town manager is, I think, less confident will happen. So I'm kind of wondering why we're spending any money until we know if that grant is solved or not.
You're gonna punt to Alex on that one.
Yeah, wish I could punt back, but
Yeah, it won't get far.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think in order to get any construction done, anytime for a construction grant, you have to have design work done. This is something that we're gonna need to design. I think it behooves us to have designs ready for a competitive process. Go after grants and try to leverage our design in order to get the work done that needs to get done. So we felt that it made sense to fund it.
Charlie.
So my question is also about the bike lane design work. And I've been reading recently in the paper that the city of Boston is sort of backing away from its various complex bike lane and parking design schemes. And I'm just wondering what the town has got in mind, and if it's, and part of the problem is they're very complicated, and secondly, they're lightly used. So if we have the same approach here, is capital money being spent on something that eventually is not going to be successfully used or implemented or used?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I don't think that I can answer it because it is sort of a philosophical question, but I think that we envision the usage, the amount of riders that we see on the trail, on Mass Ave, other parts of town, that we do need more bike lane infrastructure to sort of accommodate that. It's a really interesting question and a good point, though, that other communities that have built, that were ahead of us are now pulling back, and that is something that we really should consider and need to consider.
Especially if we're spending money on it.
For it, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think now the city of Boston was mentioned. I think the mayor of the city of Boston made it very clear in her interview yesterday, WGBH, that they're not pulling back. They're just merely replacing the flexi posts, which were temporary, with more permanent solutions. They're not pulling back from their bike lanes. Flexi posts, which are supposed to be temporary, that was what was there. They're going to replace them with more permanent things. So I don't think they're in any way pulling back from their plan.
I'll test.
I was just curious what is being photo for the Ryder Street hockey rink intersection there, for the bikeway?
That's why we're doing this design right now. There's $100,000 here for that. There is gonna be, much more capacity in that area, with potential commercial clients. The rink is extremely popular. So this design, so there's $50,000 that is currently being leveraged for preliminary design. This $100,000 will take it through final design. And so whatever sort of that design comes up with, that will be the plan. There will be, professionals and experts that sort of study that and come up with a plan.
I think there's a public process as well.
There is.
Just starting.
It was just announced, yeah.
Michael.
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yeah, so for Ryder Street, wasn't there talk of a skate park down in that, right along the bike path between the playground, the baseball field and the
Hills Hill.
Hills
Talking about Hills Hill,
Well,
or-
Hills Hill is biking, but I thought weren't they gonna move that, the Hills Hill, oh, maybe it was the bike, mountain bikes to that area? From Hills Hill down to,
No, it's
oh,
staying
no,
at
okay,
Hills
it's
Hill.
still, okay, all right. So the bike lane issue here is the reality that it's almost impossible to take a bike from Ryder Street up to Summer Street because it's such a disaster. The roads are such a disaster.
There's that, and there's the crossing by like along Ryder Street. We have cars that regularly pull onto the bike path, that park along the bike path. The people that are visiting the arena from out of town cause a lot of issues. It's the whole area is congested. The Arlington Brewery is supposedly gonna be going in there. We're gonna have serious capacity issues there in the near future. And so, this is to try to get as quickly ahead of that as we possibly can.
As someone who biked in the 90s through Cambridge and Boston, although and who isn't all that caught up in the bike lanes, the way they're being done here, this is an area that needs decent bike access that's safe, particularly for the kids, because there are a lot of kids riding through there. So I'm all for this particular project.
Yeah, I've been, I'm renovating my home and in an apartment that looks out on this exact intersection and looks out over the building that we just demolished today, at the recycling site. And the number of cars that line the bike path, I mean, is so concerning, and I had never noticed it before. I didn't have that view at night.
Just a quick point on the bike lanes, and we see people biking or don't see people biking. Biking is sort of a mode of transportation. And think of it like I have a car, I have a bike, I can walk. If I get in my car, I have a driveway that goes right to a road that goes right to my destination, so that network is complete. It works very well. Bike lanes are sort of a network that's being built within it, right? So to imagine if you got in your car and you drove down Mass Ave and 2 blocks of it were disturbed, you might be less likely to take your car. So just a way to think about it's gonna happen in phases, and maybe it takes a whole bunch of phases to connect a bunch of people from this point to a common destination, and that's when you'll see the spike in traffic. It won't be every foot you add, you get another one.
Sophie?
On the ADA accessibility upgrades, can you explain why there's 350,000 built up? Why hasn't that been spent?
A lot of this comes down to staffing issues we've had in facilities, in HHS, and sort of a turnover of staff in the town manager's office. That's sort of the triangle that manages the spending of this money. Christine Bongiorno, who's our deputy town manager, has put together a plan on how to spend down this backlog and is working on it this year. A few examples of projects that this money is actively being looked at being spent on is that a ramp at the Littlemore Robbins house at Gift Cottage, handicap restrooms at the Parmenter School, indoor and outdoor work around town hall complex, including railings, and additional handicap accessible bathrooms at the library. So it's something that she is actively working on, reducing this backlog. In addition, because we have this backlog, this has typically been a $100,000 annual item. We took it out for this year in order to get caught up on that backlog. And then the anticipation we would reintroduce it in future plans.
There's no, okay. Something that came up at another meeting somewhere about the universal playground at Robbins or that area was that there's no handicap parking that was planned around there, so you have this universal playground with no handicap parking, and and that's not on your list there, and I haven't seen it anywhere else.
I'll look into it. I'm not, this is like first thing I'm hearing about it, so.
Yeah, no, it was, yep, it came up at another meeting, and the idea, and I heard that there had been a phase 2 proposed for that area that would include figuring out handicap parking, but that phase 2 was never committed to or in actually going forward, so therefore it just seems an odd situation, and then to hear that there's this money that hasn't been spent is sort of disconcerting. And that we're not gonna add money this year either to.
Right, I'll talk to Christine, I don't know if this is on her radar or not, I'll talk to Natasha, who's our recreation director, and I'll see the sort of statuses and I'll email you, like, if I can get an update.
Great, thank you.
Facilities.
Alright, so facilities for FY26, plan of allocation is around $470,000. Notable items, the elevator in the community safety building needs to be replaced. It's a 40-year-old elevator. And the same consultant who has consulted with the town on other elevators has said that it needs to be replaced, except for a few parts. The next one up is the central fire station. In 2015, some problems were discovered where it's obviously a brick and mortar building, so water seeping through and things like that. So in 2015, there was sealant applied and building was sealed, but that needs to be replaced every 10 years. So that's coming up due. So that's the $85K over there. And then we have a vehicle replacement. This is a 2011 Ford pickup. It's a snowplow. It's one of the 4 snowplows that's used by the town. So that's up for replacement. That's $70,000 allocation there. And a couple items for Robbins Library. One is the lower floor, the kids area. The carpet needs to be replaced, pretty old. Currently, it's a mix of vinyl and carpet. It's really old, so that's $70,000. And the libraries department, Anna and others, they've been asking for a more proactive needs assessment. So we've been pretty reactive with libraries. Needs assessment is a comprehensive, proactive study to get into what is it that we need to have, what is the roadmap, all of that. The ask is much higher, but we've allocated $25K. The proposal is to allocate $25K. The rest of it, libraries, they plan to get it funded from the trust. So our proposal is to allocate $25K. Moving on to the next slide quickly, the out years, FY27 to 30, we got, I'll just go at a high level. We got a couple of vehicle replacements. So these are all part of the plan. One is a 2013 Chevy Express van. So that's used for a couple of things. That's used for flowing schools, as well as I think it also has a bucket to do some electrical work. So it's sort of a multi-purpose vehicle. Couple of mechanical systems replacements, one in HQ, one Highland, HVAC basically. And the other one is the Robbins Library storefront doors. So it's got a lot of issues right now. Several of them, including it's not, very handicap friendly. So there are ADA complaints to ADA commission as well. So multiple things. So these are a few of the items to cap off the out years, where the totals allocation proposed is around 1.1 million.
Any questions on facilities? All right, none. Community safety.
Okay, community safety, so, combined between police and fire, our acquisition cost in 2026 is about $460,000, it's a light year. It fluctuates dramatically from year to year based upon the cost of some pretty expensive vehicles, and you'll see them in the out years. So for police, it is solely one item in 26, that's the vehicle replacement program at its $175K per year rate. Usually police replaces 2 marked and 1 unmarked car. They actually said that they would probably intend on doing 3 marked cars in 2026. In the out years, as noted, there's an additional vehicle replacement that's actually a F-150 pickup truck. They use those to carry equipment, barricades, cones, and the like. That truck will be 10 years old in FY28, so that's about time for replacement. The police use hybrid vehicles. Fully electric vehicles are incompatible with the needs of the police in terms of you have to have an offline to charge, but they're being used 24/7, so that's not an option. So hybrid is the next best. Currently, it's about 90% plus hybrid fleet. The specialty vehicle, the F-150, that would be gasoline. There is an option for an E-150, which is the Ford electric pickup truck. That also comes at a cost premium of about 50%. So they are not asking for it yet. If our energy department push them to go with the zero emission vehicle, we have to come up with the further funding.
Questions on police?
Over to fire. The biggest item in 2026 is actually not a vehicle or other equipment. It's this thing called the TRX-50 alarm receiving system and antenna. So and we have a picture here of both the system that is on a desktop system for receiving the signals, but also a sample of what these look like. They can be mounted in the open, but they can also be, and the intent is for them to be really mounted in buildings. They transmit signals from a pull box, which still exists. We have it in our schools, we have it in some town buildings, also in some private businesses as well. And that signal goes to fire stations and then it's received at the computer system. We have a system that already exists, it's 20 years old, and the vendor said to us that it's no longer being manufactured, can't be supported, so it needed to be replaced. We have in FY26 also one vehicle, it's a Ford 250, that's a heavier duty than F-150, and that's fire cannot use an F-150 or E-150. They need to have something that's a bit heavier duty to accommodate a plow, to do towing, etc. That's gasoline. I'll skip over to gray for a second. Also in 26, we have the usual protective gear for our firefighters. There are 80 firefighters. This will get about 10 units of gear at $5,000 and change per. These last 8 years, so you get through the whole cycle. It comprises, pants, coat, hood, boots, helmet, gloves, the whole shebang for each firefighter. And the jaws of life, we don't use these very often, but when you need them, you need them. And the ones we have currently are over 15 years old, which is beyond the manufacturer's recommended lifespan. Also, because they're so old, it's hard to find replacement parts even if you wanted to stretch them out further, but they don't want to, now it's time. So that's the items in black are just FY26. In gray, you'll see we have a lot of vehicles coming in the next few years. There's several Ford Explorers, which could also be hybrid. Ford Interceptor, We have 2 ambulances coming due, a pumper in FY '29, expensive, and then a ladder, even more expensive, coming due in FY '30. Both the pumper and the ladder are on a 20-year replacement cycle, and these will be 20 years old by the time of their purchase. Also in the out years at the bottom, you'll see that we have the SCBA, that's self-contained breathing apparatus, that's scuba, but for not underwater. It's the gear, the bottles and the masks that firefighters use when they go into a fire and they need to have air. These also last on the order of 10 years, and what we have now will be more than 10 years old in FY '29. This will comprise 32 units and then 80 bottles and 80 masks. Each firefighter would have to have their own mask. And then finally, firefighters spend a lot of time in their firehouses, and in order to keep in shape, they need equipment for exercise, and this is a replacement cycle for that.
Questions on fire? Josh and
Not much of a question, but in terms of the alarm system, just seems to me, I assume like if all cell coverage went out, these would still function?
Yeah, they're radio based.
Is that the main benefit? Because otherwise,
They need to function in an emergency when cells don't, essentially, that's why we need them.
and like how many of these cover the whole town?
I don't know, you know?
I don't know.
They're strategically placed throughout town. I don't know exactly how many there are.
Peggy?
Thank you. So I have a question about the Jaws of Life extrication equipment. Is there any conversation about sharing this type of equipment if it is used so rarely, and sharing it with another town?
I don't think so, because they ride on the truck. So the truck that is responding, they're needed in like in emergent situations where there's somebody who's injured in a vehicle. Waiting for mutual aid may become problematic, and so it is something that I've pushed the chief on, and he was pretty adamant that we need to replace it now. So.
Okay, yeah. Charlie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on the pumper and the ladder, the number of fire calls have been going down over the last 30 years, quite dramatically, and the fire department is principally doing medical emergency support, and they do a great job on everything. But the depreciation on the pumper and the ladder, is that based on years or miles? I mean, or how can I say it? Pumping use as opposed to just moving. What causes the depreciation, and how is it measured?
I think it's years. I don't know that you can quantify the number of fires that they've been on and say, all right, then this thing, after it hits 100 fires, then it's onto the fire truck graveyard and get a new one. They do have a useful life associated with them, and this is something that we've really tried to push the chief on, to be mindful of pushing it and extending it to as far as we possibly can. But it comes down to, he was pretty adamant about replacing it on a cycle, not on a usage rate.
There were concerns also, he said that pushing it out a year wouldn't cause a violation of mutual aid, but if you do it too many times, then you do have a problem with that.
Because you're not. I can understand if they're rusting out or something like that, but these are all kept inside most of the time, and they're pretty well maintained.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And they're very expensive, yes.
Yeah.
Anything else on fire before we go on?
Back to IT for the town. There's IT on the town side. The first 3 projects are pretty standard network infrastructure, just upgrading end-of-life network switches. Town computer refresh program is replacing aging servers. We still do have some for local shares. I think they're migrating to OneDrive, I think this year, so you might see decrease in local server requirements. On the town software upgrades and standardization, you'll see this is some of the effects of the changes we're making for computer-related purchases to reflect the increase in SaaS utilization. You see this year it's 140,000 for licensing additional OpenGov modules, but in the out years it drops to 30,000. We are sort of providing a transition path for the operating budget rather than trying to whack them all at once. The next item is one that I know is near and dear to Alex's heart, and this is also another. This is a display also of that new SaaS program. The first year of this will be funded from capital, and then subsequently needs to be fit into the operating budget. But this will help organize basically the operating and capital budgeting. And Alex, you can probably speak more.
Yeah, it'll help organize the sort of all phases of both of those. They run on parallel tracks of both budget processes. Additionally, it'll pay dividends with personnel in terms of costing out. So projecting what our biggest cost, which is personnel, and it's highly specific on where each individual employee works, how long they're tenured, et cetera, what bargaining unit they're in. So it helped that, and then it would pay big dividends on the labor relations side. I spend probably a third to half of my time working on HR related things, various negotiations, and this would really help us test out sort of the costs associated with those when we're at the bargaining table. So it would be very beneficial.
And then the final item is the essentially the finishing up of the conference room presentation technology project this year, putting them in fire stations, community rooms, and then going forward, it's really just upgrading and maintaining existing systems. So that concludes IT, but the next one is recreation.
There might be some questions.
Alex, will this new budgeting software where you have to take it out of Munis and then create this document, and then we take this document and create a finance committee report, can that do it all?
You're missing a huge part of the problem also. Then we have to turn that into a financial plan. So yes, it will do some version of all of that. Now the thing is it will not recreate that exactly. It'll look different, but it'll do all that. Yes, which is why we need it.
And produce something we could then turn around for town meeting.
Right. It may not. So the problem is the format may not look exactly the same, and so what we are used to may look a little different, but which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
Alex, you're welcome to check up our world if we get the pipeline from budget to budget book to, like, I don't care. Anyways, in my opinion. So am I correct that OpenGov might have some ability to visualize budget and spending tools in it?
You are correct.
So you could replace the Arlington visual budget now that the team is retired?
That would mean more attention paid to it.
And it's already retired.
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. But I would like to see us not be without that ability to visualize how money is flowing.
Right. Part of this, another lens to look at this through is for transparency. This would help that tremendously. These sort of modern budget softwares have transparency modules built in.
Okay, and the budget product is gonna cost us $75K every year?
It depends. If we go with OpenGov, it's more like $130K a year, which is insane. So it just depends. There's a few of these that we're looking at. Obviously, we haven't made up our minds. We don't have an appropriation yet, but Lauren, Julie, and I have been interviewing these people. We spent time with a lot of these different vendors, and we're thinking about what it may look like. I actually met with Alan Jones, who had a different idea, which may make more sense also. And looking at sort of a consultant who's an expert in Excel and rebuilding our sort of processes through Excel, modernizing it that way. So like, I'm open to considering everything, but we do need, there are so many, currently there's so many thousands of touch points in our budget. It's an overwhelming number of things that have to happen, it's just ripe for mistakes to happen. And so modernizing it somehow, I think we're ready to do.
All right, we should talk.
Jennifer. Just a quick question about the conference room presentation technology. I think at one point, this room was talked about as being sort of given a more sophisticated hybrid technology. Is that what this money is for, or is?
Yeah, so we did get quotes on this room, the select board chamber, and one other conference room, I think at HHS, and they came in at around, we didn't feel the values, they were gonna use ARPA money for it, but they came in at about $70,000 per. And so we backed off of those, thinking the value wasn't great. And it's like a setup like this, like a neat board.
Right.
These are, I think, around $12,000. They have, which the screen, I think it's a 65-inch screen with sort of a software package that's built into it. So obviously this room probably needs a bigger screen because of the capacity. So I think they do have a new product that has a bigger screen. So
So these are small tweaks.
These are
not,
smaller
okay,
than like those bigger room projects.
Okay. Peggy.
Thank you. So I have two questions about the software upgrades. First of all, how would it impact or relate to the school?
So are you talking for the OpenGov or for the budget software?
I think I'm not totally
Sure.
understanding what the OpenGov.
Sure, okay, actually, that's a great point. So OpenGov, what we're doing is we're gonna be hopefully buying the like a permitting module, like full access to the permitting module. And that'll allow us to bring all permits and licenses online. So for residents, they can, instead of having to come in to request building permits and dog licenses, those sorts of things, they will be able to push all of those online now. So that's like the OpenGov, that $140,000. That also includes some money for Munis module upgrades, which we sort of standardize and do every year. So that's that $140,000. The $75,000, we're also looking at OpenGov for that. It's a separate product. The way that these companies work is they compartmentalize and they break up into different modules. So you have to essentially buy more they force multiply off themselves. And of course, you need to buy them all to get all the best features. And so that the other one is to look at software. I have worked with Fran Gorski, who's the school finance superintendent, assistant superintendent. They would need to procure some version of this separately, which is something that I've been fighting with some of these vendors about, that it doesn't make sense for all one organization. But yes, working with schools, not fully coordinated on that yet. We work too independently to be fully coordinated on this right now, but it is something that he's very interested in doing also.
And my second question is, these are upfront acquisition costs, or are they, and can we expect in future years to have some kind of a maintenance?
Yes, yeah, so these are, think of them as subscription costs, basically.
Okay.
So it's an annualized thing. The first year will be more expensive because there's onboarding and build out and sort of consultant time that comes with the project. Once it's launched and fully live, then there will be a lesser annual cost, but it'll still be substantial. And that will be in the operating budget in the IT department.
Thank you.
Recreation.
Good evening, apologies for being late, a little late this evening. So for recreation, as we talked about this last year, but basically they're kind of stepping back, particularly with the new director, Natasha, and doing two master plans. So this fiscal year, or FY26, the fiscal year we're talking about, they're gonna do a field master plan. The cost went up slightly because they're gonna do a little bit more work at Poets Corner, because that was a larger project that was being discussed that isn't happening, but they want to be ready for any future developments there. And then they're going to do a playground master plan after that, we originally had it in FY '28, but that was really just about balancing the years of the plan, so we were able to move it back into FY '27, so they'll sort of do those in sequence. And I guess I'll actually jump down to the last bullet from there, which is that at this point in time, they don't have any significant playground or park renovation requests. The one they're working on, Parallel Park, is shown. This is a good example, actually, of what Alex talked about with ARPA funds. We spent a lot of ARPA funds on playgrounds. The Community Preservation Act is also paying for a lot of playgrounds. So they don't show up on the capital plan, and they continue to not show up because they're doing these master plans. But once these master plans are done, then the likelihood is that there'll be a whole list of projects that come out of that. And so it's a little weird to say to this group, oh, we don't have any requests, to point that out. But the reason I do that is only to say that it won't be that way forever. So, don't be surprised. It'll probably be a couple of years before we start to see those come in because of the way the planning process works. But, it is what we want them to do, be good planning, and then come back and say, these are what the needs are. And then I'll go back to the middle, which is just their ongoing yearly sort of planning and kind of capital repair budget. So they do $50,000 a year in ADA type improvements to make our parks and playgrounds more accessible. They do about $10K a year on sort of smaller scale feasibility studies to help inform kind of what the needs are. And then they do these playground audits and repairs, again, that's sort of capital repairs for safety reasons or when playground equipment is worn out or broken. And that's generally been $75,000 a year. They're requesting $125,000 in the upcoming fiscal year in order to replace some port in place protective stuff on the ground at the Florence, thank you, playground, I wrote it down, and I forgot, that's been torn up, and so that's a safety issue for a lot of the playgrounds. So that is recreation in a nutshell, but so don't expect it to be this small forever.
Questions on recreation? Topher?
I just had a question on ARPA money. It is in our bank account, right, as opposed to.
Some of it is still there, most of it is spent.
No, but I mean, so anything that.
It is, we don't need to like ask the feds for it.
That's what.
It's been there, and frankly, it's kind of beautiful. We've been earning interest on it this whole time, so, which is great, and that's the general thing.
Any other questions on recreation? All right, I guess it's back to you, Chris.
All right, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the Veterans Memorial Project, just to kind of give you an update of where we are. When we last talked to you, there had been a $200K design and planning allocation in FY '24. That is not yet spent. This year, the department, as I mentioned earlier, asked for $300,000 additional, which we did not approve because the budget was tight. So what's in the plan now is $200K for FY '26 and $700 for FY '27. So $1.1 million in total town funding. And the agreement was that the department would be looking for grants, earmarks, donations, et cetera, to come up with the total project cost. There's a dynamic there where it's hard to raise money, and that wishes and desires start up high, and then you run into budgets. And so the initial estimate last year was $2.65 million for the total project cost. I believe that it came in actually when we bid it at more like 3.1.
Just over 3,
yeah. And so there's been reduction in scope and trying to bring that down to something that's currently estimated at $2 million. Still a lot of fundraising to go before it can actually be built. But the hope is that construction would happen in FY '26 and FY '27. Any questions on that one?
John?
Is this the one in Lowell Street in Mass Ave?
No.
No. So if you look at the picture there, that little triangle has the Civil War Memorial in the center in the upper left and the Central Fire Station in the lower right. So it's that little triangle land there.
It's right here by Fire HQ.
Yep.
Got it. Because there's also the project, I believe that was approved.
The Foot of the Rocks project, I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah. So that's completely
Very
outside the
separate.
capital
That's
budget.
separate because it's not funded through the capital plan.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so the next slide is on building electrification, which I talked about a little bit earlier. We did not approve this proposal to do design study for school electrification, one building per year at about $900K per building. And the reason, we talked a lot about it because a lot of us were excited about the possibility of electrifying all these schools. The problem is there's no identified funding source for actually doing the work. And it's roughly speaking $10 million a school. And since technology moves pretty fast in this world, it seemed foolish to us to spend $1 million on a plan, which would include, specific equipment, and then put it on the shelf and wait for $10 million to turn up, and then find out the plan's kind of out of date and the equipment's no longer available, and then you kind of have to go back and redo design work. So our recommendation is that these kind of projects need to be funded all together, design and implementation money, all in one source, whatever it is we decide that source is. And right now, those are too big for the capital plan to take on all by itself. So I think there's some work to do to figure out how that happens. And then also, there's been some talk this evening about creating is it called a revolving fund, or is it a different term? I forgot.
It's a revolving.
Revolving fund where you could take, you could put some money in there, spend it on an energy project, get some money back in rebates, and then use that to kind of keep the ball rolling. So that is one of the things that could happen. But we didn't think it was wise to spend capital money now on just designs. So that's what we spent. Yes.
We have a cycle of rebuilding or renovating schools. Would it make sense to synchronize with that and sort of do electrification when we rebuild or do a big renovation, like the Audison?
Yeah, or when the systems are wearing out.
As opposed to a separate project.
Yeah.
They could be more expensive.
Yeah. Any other questions on that one? Okay. So back to where we started. What we're asking you for is favorable action on the recommended budget. That's what we're spending next year. Reappropriation of the unused capital funds, which we haven't talked about yet, that comes next, and endorsing the 5-year plan. And no debt decisions again. So the next slide, Julie will take care of actually what the recommended vote looks like.
I'm wrapping it up. So we are asking you to, as Chris said, vote the capital budget tonight. So non-exempt debt service is $7,417,567. Our exempt debt service, again, not in the capital plan, but part of this vote, $12,707,667. So total debt service for fiscal 26 is $20,125,234. The cash piece of our budget is $5,031,594. And then we've got those other funding sources totaling $574,674. For a total net capital plan budget of $24,582,154. On the next two slides, this talks just about the reappropriated dollars. So on the prior slide, you saw those sweeps at $232,000. We
call them capital carry forwards.
We call them capital carry forwards, also known as sweeping previous dollars. But we took $124,142.95. Those were borrowed funds, so we reappropriated those to on the next slide, you can see the rooftop unit project. So that is how we mapped what we're going to use those previously borrowed funds for next in fiscal 26 if it is approved. And there's our budget.
All right, any final questions? Alan, Michael, and then Jennifer.
When I look at the table on page 17 or slide 17 and this appropriation request, I'm having a hard time matching the numbers. What are they supposed to match?
So you're looking at the yellow, is that the 17,
Yeah.
the yellow, yeah, so, okay, so if you look at prior non-exempt debt service and you add new non-exempt debt service, so that's okay, so let's see, Micaiah, will you go up one, I believe, down one? Okay, so if we're looking at the fiscal 26 column, so $7,028,578 Alan, that plus 388,989, that's gonna give you our non-exempt debt service number,
Is there anything on
seven.
page 17 that has the 24 million?
No.
No,
So the
no,
reason it
Alan,
doesn't
we
is
go through
because
this every year,
I
it's in
know.
the long-range plan, it's in
We
the
have the
long-range
secret
plan.
decoder ring.
Because we don't have the exempt, right, because we don't have the exempt debt in the capital plan, so you will not see this, so the exempt debt is not in the capital plan.
Right.
But in your long-range plan, you'll see that 24,582, 154.
No, I didn't see it in the long-range plan I have, but I just.
Okay, yes,
Can I
yes.
make a point? We refer to this as the Alan Jones.
This is the Alan
statement.
Jones number,
So-
because
No, I always
we
have to
talk
fight
about
for it
this
every
every year. You will, and I mean, the cash ties out and the non-exempt ties out, right? It's just that exempt number that you're not seeing.
We'll work on
I
it.
know, it's a little, I know, it feels a little funky.
It's just that there's like two disjoint presentations of the same numbers and there's a lot of lines going back and forth. It's hard to, I literally have a secret decoder ring that
know
matches
you
these
do.
together. But I
We're-
wish it was done someplace in this slideshow.
We're working on making it a little simpler.
Michael,
Disappointed that you told veterans that we're pushing you out, not just off, but out. Dismayed that there isn't anything you can do in this plan, this coming fiscal year, for town hall. Biggest single facility in town. Roof is literally falling in. I don't have to tell you, Alex. People wiping bits of plaster off their desks in the mornings from another leak or another crack or another failure. And you estimate that there's $100 million of work to be done? And we can't do better than, next year we'll hire a manager, and after that, we'll have to do a study. So if our budgets reflect our values with dollar signs attached, I've heard. Can't go along with that.
Jennifer, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just realized I should have asked this on facilities, but the piece that's missing from this budget is the Fox Library, and I'm wondering if we have any thoughts about how that will impact future capital planning budgets.
So it has been publicized that the Fox Library did not receive a building grant for,
Oh, actually, I didn't realize that.
so you may not have
Okay.
realized
I
that, so
didn't realize that, yeah.
that's why it's not included, and that is essentially been.
Got it, okay, thanks.
Shirley and then Dean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in the various discussions of mostly around facilities, you mentioned the ARPA funds. Are the ARPA funds included in the other category of capital planning?
Yeah, if they're included in the plan, if they're budgeted in there, then they would exist under other.
Under other.
Right.
Thank you.
Dean.
Well, I was told we had questions, because I was just gonna move favorable action until we can wrap it up.
Is there a second?
Second. Do you want me to read each one? That's usually what I do.
Go ahead, Dean.
Great. Julie, you're gonna get to give me the number when I get to the end of the first sentence.
All right.
All right, so first,
You want
I
the big
move
number?
favorable action on the capital expenditure budget in the amount of
582,154.
and that includes we include the exempt in the vote?
That includes the exempt, yes. Well, yes, I think we do include the exempt in the vote. Yeah, we vote that bottom line.
So that number right there, that's what I agree with, yeah, there we go. Okay, that first. Second, I move favorable action that the sum of $124,142.95 is transferred from the amounts, blah, 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 it's the second slide. Sorry, thank you. And then third, what am I doing with the third?
Endorsing the 5-year plan.
I'm endorsing the 5-year plan, thank you so much. Yes, I move that we endorse the 5-year plan.
And I believe Alan Costi is seconding that motion. Any further discussion?
Without rescinding anything?
None is here.
All right, all in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Opposed? 1. Any abstentions? 0. It has been approved. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. And
Thank you very
all of
much.
your hard work. Jennifer, do you have budgets that you can do tonight?
So the remaining budgets are either not mine, unfortunately, because they're either called or.
That's for you.
Good. Jordan's, like Randy, right? Jordan's, this, and the remaining one that's mine is, I can't do.
When can you have, we have very limited time.
Yeah, well,
for
so
these budgets.
Paul was on here possibly for consent, if he's on here tonight.
Yeah.
Because, I just talked about the budgets, I just don't, it's not mine, I have mine, you know.
Paul, are you there? Paul, can you hear?
Yes, I am here.
Paul, can you do some budgets from where you are?
I can, if you give me a moment.
Well, Paul is getting organized. We have 2 meetings next week. Monday, water bodies and civilian police, and then the CPA is on Wednesday, and then we have to finalize all of our other budgets, plus the warrant articles, so that we can deal with the schools and the disability commission on the 24th. We have to get our draft report to the printer the first week in April, so we have a crunch. So we have to finish our business by the 24th. Can we do the parking budget next week?
If you get 5 minutes tonight, we can do it tonight.
Okay, well, maybe we'll do that.
I got it.
All right, Paul, you ready?
Yes. Engineering, which is on page 94. And McKay, do you have the DPW slides?
Yes.
File? If you can put that up. And go another, I think the next page should, yeah, engineering, great. Just the big picture is that this division oversees the design and implementation of projects. They don't generally do the projects, they oversee them, especially the highway projects and the water and sewer projects. Last year, they started with 3 employees and 1 vacancy, and the town engineer left. The assistant was promoted, but they have not then been able to fill the assistant position or that 1 vacancy they had already, which was the junior, one of the junior civil engineers. As a result, they've had 2 people doing the work of 4. Mike Rademacher has filled in with some work in preparing requests for proposals, but basically they're scraping by. And because of that, of the staffing issues, that's why some of these highway projects that we've talked about, were talked about earlier, did not get done. They hope to get some projects done between now and the end of the fiscal year, but a bunch will be carried over to 2026. And the capital funding will be carried over for that. To see what the questions, there was a question of how much, what they spend on overtime, and it's to do work supervised work that might have to be done out of normal business hours because of damage or repair or other things might have to be done on the weekend. There was a question of the spending in professional and technical services in the 2024 budget. And in fact, because of money that Mike Rademacher was able to move around, it was even more than the 70,000 listed here. And that money was spent on more work to cover pieces of the DPW facilities building project, and because of it running longer in time-wise than expected. And a question on the mobility improvements, and that was touched upon a little by the Capital Planning Committee. And then they again, that's some of the projects that have been carried over to the next fiscal year. So I move the budget as printed of $178,801.
All
Second.
right, any questions on the engineering budget? Peggy?
Thank you, Paul. So I may have missed it. What actions are being done to fill the vacancies?
Yeah, they have been posting on numerous job boards. And the HR department is actively reaching out to find candidates, but they're just having a hard time finding candidates.
And why is why? Is it the salary? Is it?
Jennifer, do you have a son?
Yeah, so this is one of the places where he said ARPA money is actually causing us problems, because all these towns have had ARPA money and they've had to use designers. And there's just been a bunch of money that they need projects designed for, and it's been harder to recruit for that reason. But that was one of his explanations.
And maybe when all the municipalities actually finish spending their ARPA money, we'll see an improvement in the job, in the employee availability.
Any other question? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous.
The next one for me is through here. Is cemetery. Which, cemetery on 112. So this division is responsible for the maintenance and operation of the Mount Pleasant Cemetery. There was a question about the salaries of the supervisor and foreman seemed to go up significantly, and that had to do with the whole union settlement delay that they essentially got both COLA from the previous contract and the current contract showed up effectively this year. The contracted services had a jump because of fence work, and the offsets here come from the lots and graves and perpetual care funds, and the current balances are about 1.2 million and about 9.4 million. The See, as far as questions that we asked, and it's, again, they still have a vacancy for a motor vehicle operator, and they have to borrow some staff from the rest of DPW when they need that filled in. And yeah, I think that's the gist of how the questions came out. So I move a total of $262,920.
Second.
All right, any questions? Topher and then Michael?
Yeah, I was just curious, the equipment operator, is this all their cemetery work done in the DPW yard, or is there separate stuff in the cemetery itself?
This is, the moving the equipment at the cemetery itself to do the whatever grave digging or whatever that they're dealing with.
They're digging graves.
They are the.
But I mean, they have
That's the thing.
they have a garage there or something.
Michael?
What's the difference in those two funds, lots and graves versus perpetual care?
I forget, and I didn't ask this time, and
okay.
Yeah, and there was some difference also in how fast they can, how much of each fund they can use each year, and I don't have those numbers here. One other note: the estimate was that they have about space for about 170 more graves in the cemetery. And they have plenty of space for doing cremains. But if they use up the 170 more spaces, they don't really know what they were going to do to handle it.
Paul, can you get us information? Can you get information to answer Michael's question about the difference between lots and graves?
Yes, okay, I will.
I believe that lots and graves, we won't need money there when we fill up the entire space, right? So the perpetual care is, lots and graves is for current work that we're doing, where perpetual care is for mowing and all the other applications. That's what
Okay, I'll confirm that with Mike Rademacher.
Any other questions on the cemetery budget? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous.
I could do the Snowmass if you like.
All right, take it away.
Do you have that? I'm just trying to think in my head, let's see. Yes, okay. So some people might know about the reason why we choose certain amounts. Once you put a snow and ice budget at a certain amount, you can never go lower. So you can never, so a town could never say, oh, last year I needed 2 million and this year I only need 1.5 million. Contractually, you can never go lower.
Well,
So-
it could go down, but that means you can't deficit spend. So you could go
Okay,
down,
so
but
so
if
you
next
can
year
go
you
down,
get
but then
the
you
two-
can never deficit spend.
Yeah, so
Right.
if next year you get the $2.3 million
Got it.
2015
Got it.
winter, you can't deficit.
Got it. Got it. So there's a reason to be fairly conservative with this budget number, for these reasons. What?
Would be fairly liberal.
No, we're fairly conservative, right? So actually, the past couple of years, we've been on target. So there's not been high snow years, if you remember. There were some ice events, but we basically spent at the budget the last couple of years. Even though there are very few snow events, there's a lot of times where you have to go out with salt, and salt's expensive, and so it still costs a bunch of money. This year, as of sort of last week, we are basically also at the number. So if it doesn't snow again for the rest of the year, we're good. Right, but never says March.
Yes, it does.
So basically, if the number, just going back past policy, if we overspend this budget by a little bit, Mike says he usually finds the money in his budget. He doesn't go and look for a transfer from town. But if it's huge, and those are those years that we had over, 100 inches of snow, type of those big years, is when he would go to the town and ask for a deficit spend. He doesn't expect to get it this year. Let's see, we have questions about, okay, so we had 50 to 65,000 remaining in the account. Question about the number of contractors. We have a guarantee payment of $3,500 for contractors. That's helped us a little bit in attracting and retaining contractors, but we're, like many of these kind of positions, there's a lot of demand in the private sector, and it's always hard. We do pay our own staff for some of the snow removal, and we have to pay double time, again, because this is a great in demand job. They could moonlight on their own and get a lot more money. So we can't even pay that anymore. Yeah, I think that is it. So I would recommend favorable action on the proposed budget of $1,172,013.
Second. Question. All right, no questions. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous.
And then we have only one more budget, which is Jordan said that we can just leave it for him.
All right.
And then-
I still have street lighting.
Oh, you have street lighting. All right, awesome.
Go ahead, Paul.
So, let me find the page again. I think that's right after cemetery. So page 116. And that should be the last one in your. Okay. Again, this is work, it's all contracted out for both street lighting and traffic signals. There was we show a 1-year bump in 2024 in the street lighting because of some additional lighting done in the municipal lots. The warranty for the LED street lights has expired. I actually forgot to check in the capital plan that they said that the replacement lights are due in the 2028 capital plan. The new lights will be more efficient, and they'll also actually start saving money on the electricity costs. And they do have spare of the existing street lights that they will hope to tide them over until the new lights will come out in the FY28 plan. The actual contract expenditures for 2024 were low because of some work and funding that was deferred until 2025. And year to date now is 110, and but he thinks that the 90,000 for next fiscal year is a reasonable budget number. And so I'll move a total of 150,000 for street lighting and 115,000 for traffic signals.
Second. Any questions on street lighting or traffic signals? Topher.
Just one, do we have all LED lights at this point?
For years, yes. There was also another question about whether our lights coordinate with MBTA, and I asked a bunch of people, and it doesn't seem that they do. There's one question whether the one at Teal Street does, because that's the bus prioritization line, but none of the others do. And the couple people I checked with weren't sure at Teal Street.
Any other questions? All right, all in favor of the street lighting and traffic signals budget, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous. Michael, can you do parking and format?
Yes. Parking begins on 69, the line items are on 70 and 71. There's no chance to put it there. For the reasons I'm about to summarize, I move acceptance of the parking taxation total of $60,595. Second. And that's based upon salary for one person. God bless her, she's the one who handles all the complaints and appeals, and every time somebody calls up and wants to say something about a parking ticket, she spends more than half her time doing that. She is, the overtime is a placeholder, the cleaning allowance goes back more years than anybody can remember in the union contract. The contracted services is probably too low at $5,000. That's money that is paid to a company called Kelly and Ryan. It sounds like the morning hosts of some TV talk show, but Kelly and Ryan actually, for a set fee, which is going to come in at more like $10,000, plus figured at the rate of $2 a ticket, they handle all the post-processing, including sending out the late notices, sending out the fine information to the Registry of Motor Vehicles. We hadn't been doing that before. Our tickets could basically be laughed at and thrown away. For the last 3 fiscal years, our late fee collection has gone from $30,000 to $44,000 to $132,000. That money goes into the parking fund, which is overseen by the town manager upon the advice of a parking advisory committee. That's about $450,000 a year spent at the town manager's discretion on a number of things, including the offset to the one salary line. And improvements in the parking benefit district like planters, Big Billy, trash disposal, improvements in the Russell Common parking yard, things like that. That concludes my presentation.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions?
Just one clarification, I think that the late fees go into the general fund. The parking revenues, the meters.
Yes.
Goes into the district.
Charlie?
Yes, my recollection is that the town manager made an agreement with finance committee to present the parking district budget along with this budget. Do we have that?
We have not.
I forwarded this afternoon, but we can take that up when we get to that warrant article.
Thank you.
Does the email count?
John?
Just want to point out, the police department budget includes 3 parking control employees. So, I'm just, so in other words, you make it sound like there's just one employee involved in this, but I think there's at least a few others, right?
I don't know, well, parking enforcement is in the police budget, and I don't know if that's offset by money from the parking fund.
Got it. I think it actually partially is, but so they enforce the parking. They drive around and write the tickets, but the person you're describing actually collects the money.
That's right.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions on the parking budget? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you, Paul, and thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer, we have 2, we have motor vehicle and
We have
solid
motor
waste.
vehicles and we have trash. We do not have any clarity on trash yet.
Okay.
Or they might have some clarity. They are not willing, they cannot say anything just yet. Because there's no signed contract.
Well, we have to have a budget, so.
Yeah, they gotta pick a number.
They gotta pick a number. So they gotta pick a number between now and the 24th of this month so that we can vote on it.
Okay, I will push that.
Anything else anyone has? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.